Welcome to MacStories Unwind, a weekly review of everything MacStories and more. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is my co-host, Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
Oh, it's been quite a week, hasn't it, Federico?
Really? You think so? It's not like anything happened.
No,
Really?
no. It was very fun this week to let the cat out of the bag finally and reveal to everyone that you had the chance to do a one-on-one interview with Craig Federighi, the Senior Vice President of Software Engineering at Apple. And it was really an amazing conversation. I mean, you did a fantastic job with the interview, and I thought Craig's answers and his insights about the pointer and iPad OS and all the thought that went into it was just really amazing. And that conversation is over on AppStories in episode 162, which we'll link in the show notes. How was it doing the interview?
Yeah, I mean, it's whenever you are on AppStories twice, by definition, you become friend of the show.
Yes, he is a friend of the show.
Craig Federighi, friend of the show. Of course, I interviewed Craig the first time last year at WWDC 2019 in person. And now, obviously, this time we couldn't do it in person because of everything that is going on at the moment with the global pandemic. So we did it remotely. And I basically kept this a surprise from everyone except you and my girlfriend. I hadn't even told my mom until I was sure that the interview was going to happen. Because, with these things, especially when I'm in Italy and Craig and the rest of Apple are in the United States, there's a lot of time zone based coordination happening remotely.
Right.
So I wasn't sure until the very last moment whether we were going to do this or not. And thankfully we were able to find a schedule that worked for everybody. And I was really happy to get the time that I had. So the conversation is just about over 40 minutes, I think, which is more time than I had last year for WWDC. And with the focus being on iPad and iPadOS and the pointer, the new system pointer in iPadOS 13.4, it really gave me a chance to prepare questions and talk about details that I don't think Federighi would normally cover in promo videos or in interviews with folks who maybe do not necessarily obsess like I do about certain details, because rightfully so, because it's not their job to write an annual review of the iPad's operating system, and especially to write it, because I really care about the nerdy stuff, basically is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
I think Craig Federighi is a person who really enjoys talking about nerdy stuff. And so I think it was a very good conversation we were able to, and I mean, Craig was able because he did most of the talking, but it was able to talk about details and implementation details that you wouldn't normally hear anywhere else. And I myself, as an iPad user, as I was doing the interview, normally, like during any interview, I would look at my questions and I would, take notes, but I was just so focused on listening to what he was saying, because to me, it's like, he's the person in charge of the operating system that I use every day. And so I'm glad that people seem to be liking it. And I was definitely not as nervous as the first time last year, the first time interviewing an Apple executive on AppStories. There was, there's always a level of I don't want to say anxiety, but there's always a level of, I'm nervous because I want to do a good job, right?
Right.
And this time I was nervous, but I think I did a better job at balancing my personal, feelings about this compared to last year. I took a long weekend off. I played lots of Pokemon. I played with the dogs, and because it was the second time doing it, I think I knew that this is a person that likes to talk about nerdy stuff.
Right.
And so I knew that it wouldn't be too difficult to come up with questions and to come up with talking points. And so I'm really happy that people seem to be liking the episode, and I'm really thankful to Apple for making this possible. I'm really thankful to Craig for finding the time in his schedule to talk to me about this stuff.
Yeah, it was a really fantastic interview, and I'm sure it helped that you had done it before and you knew that that first time went well, and this one went just as well or even better. And I'm sure it also helped that you're at home in kind of your normal podcasting environment instead of sitting in a
Oh yeah.
hallway at a
Oh yeah.
conference center with someone else's equipment and all that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, that also helped.
Yeah, I mean the conversations about things like the pointer and why it's a circle and you know the flexibility and modularity of the iPad that's designed at its core to stay a tablet but also be able to turn into other things for other uses was just fascinating to me, and I really enjoyed. Yeah, it was fun to be the first person to get to listen to it because I did the edit and
Yeah.
and I've already listened to it a couple of times, and I highly recommend it to anybody who is interested in the iPad. All right, Federico, I want to move on and talk about a little bit more about what we did this week at MacStories. And, you know, we had a really big story from Ryan this week, too. Ryan has been doing this crazy experiment that I know you guys talked about some on the Adapt podcast on Relay FM, which
Yeah, but
was
see, this is perfect right now because right now I am becoming a MacStories Unwind listener because I myself didn't have the time to actually read this story as we're recording this. I have not read this story at all. So
well,
here I'm listening to Unwind do a recap of this story as a listener myself.
Well, you're getting your own Unwind, your own recap right here.
Uh-huh.
Well, okay, you did get a little of it because you guys talked about this on Adapt
Sure.
24, right? And so what for people who haven't heard that, what Ryan did is he went off and bought himself the Magic keyboard for the iPad for both the 12.9 and the 11-inch.
And he also bought an iPad.
And he bought the 11-inch iPad Pro 2020 model. He already had the 12.9. And then he's been using them for, I think, about 2 weeks now, side by side, trying to figure out which one he wanted to keep. And I don't want to spoil the surprise for anybody who hasn't read it as to where he came down on that. But I think if you've ever wondered which model is right for you, this is a really good place to start because Ryan has a lot of interesting insights into just how different apps work on a smaller screen versus the larger screen, because you know the size classes are different between one and the other, so the experience is a little different. He talks about things like reading ebooks, he talks about using an external display, talks about gaming, web browsing, just about everything. Especially, you know, what he basically did was went back to the original introduction of the iPad that Steve Jobs did in 2010 in January, and he looked at those things that Apple said the iPad was better at than either an iPhone or a laptop or other Mac. And he compared those things in his story and comes out with a conclusion as to where he's going to go. So I won't spoil that, as I said, but it's a really interesting, there's some really interesting insights in there about the difference that the size makes between these two different iPad Pros.
Very nice. I can't wait to read it myself because it's quite the read, and I'm saving it for later. So Apple also announced an updated 13-inch MacBook Pro this week. So John, give me all the details. Do I need to buy this computer? I don't think I do.
No, I don't think you do. I think it is a solid update but it's an incremental update, especially on the lower end. At the higher end, you can now what I got a couple of things that really stand out. One is that Apple doubled the storage at every level. So you can go as high as 4 terabytes of SSD storage on this machine. And before you could only get up to 16 gigabytes of RAM, now you can get 32. So if you go really high end on this, and it's not a cheap computer, it's over $3,000 at that level. But if you go with a fully spec'd machine here, you've got a ton of storage, a lot of RAM, and can really get a lot done. What didn't change, and I think disappointed some people, was that the screen didn't really change. You know, when the 16-inch model came out at the end of last year, we got a whole new screen, and it's really gorgeous. One of my kids has it, and I'm very jealous. But the 13-inch didn't get that, so it'll be interesting to see, is this kind of a interim step on the way to the long rumored 14-inch MacBook Pro? Is this going to evolve into something more? Will there be another incremental update later on with a different screen technology, whatever it happens to be? But if you need a MacBook Pro now, and you want something really fast, this is a great way to go. I almost forgot to mention too, it's got the brand new keyboard in it, just like the 16-inch. So you don't have the issues that the butterfly keyboards had. And I have a 2016 MacBook Pro, and it has had some issues with the keyboard. So this is great if you want to get one with a new keyboard. I'm not going to get it myself either. I'm still sticking with the 13-inch that I've got. But yeah, solid update.
We have a start date for WWDC 2020.
All right.
The event will be, of course, online only, and it will begin on June 22nd. So literally, this is all we have. We have a start date. We don't have any details on how long is it going to be. How will the labs work? If it's going to be an online event, free and open to all, we have no idea. How many sessions will we get? How will you be able to browse and watch sessions? Will they be streamed live? Will they all be pre-recorded? Will there be a keynote? We don't know. We only have a date, June 22nd. That said, we can, and we mentioned this on at the very end of that episode of AppStories with Craig Federighi that you mentioned. We will be doing some special coverage at MacStories and AppStories for WWDC during what we believe, although we may be wrong, it's going to be a week of sessions and labs. We're going to do something special at AppStories, and we're going to continue doing this special coverage during the summer once we've learned what's new in iOS, iPadOS, and all the other Apple platforms. We don't want to wait until September to share our reviews of Apple's new operating systems. We want to keep doing what we started doing last year and offer throughout the summer a series of preview stories and editorial pieces and analysis about the new features and the new apps and the new OSs that will be likely shown off at WWDC. So right now, we only have a date. I'm very curious to see how Apple will tackle the keynote and the sessions and especially the labs. But for now, all we have is a date. So stay tuned because we're gonna do a few special things by then.
All right, Federico, I should mention what we did on the club this week. And for Club MacStories members, we had kind of a fun issue, I think. We had an interview with the developer of Charty, which is a new utility for shortcuts that can ingest data from other sources, whether it's a CSV file or a text file or other places, and then it will plot graphs of all different sorts and with different styling and that kind of thing. So it's a new way to kind of take data into shortcuts and spit out charts. We've also got a home screen from Brian King, and listeners may remember that Brian is the person who's done some of the animations for us on the site the last couple of years, both for Federico's iOS 13 review and for his Beyond the Tablet story from, I guess, right about a year ago now, almost exactly. So yeah, Brian is going to share with us his home screen, and he does a lot of video and animation work, and it's a really interesting home screen that I think you'll enjoy.
Yeah. Brian is, as they say, a good person. So he's a friend of mine, and yeah, I haven't seen his home screen yet, so I'm very curious to see what his setup looks like.
All right, Federico, why don't you explain what you, Ryan, and I did for the club this week?
So first of all, I covered a bunch of apps myself. I spent more time than usual just browsing the App Store and coming across some interesting updates and utilities. I discovered, for example, John, that somehow, and now please don't be upset at me if these apps get removed from the App Store now that we covered them. But I was under the impression that Apple
We've done that before.
Yes. I was under the impression that Apple was not allowing utilities to browse SF symbols on the App Store. SF symbols are the developer glyphs, the developer icons that Apple has released last year. And for free, it's a set of, I don't remember how many thousands of glyphs the developers can use in their apps for free, for icons, for buttons and whatnot. And I remember that Apple was rejecting utilities to browse and preview SF symbols on iOS, but I've come across at least 3 SF symbols viewer apps on the App Store, and I covered 2 of them this week. One is called SF Symbols Browser, or viewer, one of the two. And the other is called San Fran Symbols, which is kind of funny. And San Fran Symbols is actually very good. It's got this split layout on iPad. It lets you mark certain symbols as favorites, so you can search them more, you can find them more quickly. It lets you view all the multiple weight options, so like ultra thin up to bold and black. Because SF symbols, of course, behave like fonts, like the San Francisco font. They are fully scalable and adaptable to the display. And it even lets you copy code snippets in Swift UI or UIKit. If you're a developer and you want to use a specific SF symbols, you can keep San Fran symbols on your iPad and use that as a companion utility for that. So it's very cool. So a bunch of updates. I talk about my widgets, and I think it's a pretty fun and different issue. We've been trying to do that lately because we could all use different and fun things. So hopefully, members will like what we've been doing lately.
Yeah, I think so. It's been a lot of fun trying these different things. I also cover an app in the favorites this week, which is called Infuse, and people might be familiar with that. It's a video player app that can work with Plex and a bunch of other ways too to get video into it. So I've got a lot of details on that. Federico, before we get to our picks, I want to thank our sponsor for Unwind and MacStories this week, and that is SoundSource by Rogue Amoeba. SoundSource is a Mac app for managing all of the audio ins and outs on your Mac. It has all kinds of cool features. This is an app that you and I know both use, and you can do things like designate the inputs and output devices on your Mac. You can set up the sound effects on your Mac separately from other sources. So, for example, you might want to have the sound effects play at 50% while your music plays at 100, just so that you don't have loud noises from mail or whatever it happens to be. It's got built-in effects, both an equalizer and preset effects, as well as a volume boost control that you can apply to any particular app or source. And, speaking of apps, that is one of the really unique things about this app, is that you can set up sound outputs for individual apps. What that means for like me is when I call you on Skype, I don't have to remember to switch to my headphones for when we're podcasting. It just automatically happens because Skype is associated with that output. It's a really great way to do that. Another thing that it can do is that a lot of HDMI and DisplayPort connected speakers can't be controlled through Mac OS. It's just a technical limitation. The volume controls on the keyboard don't work and that sort of thing. But with SoundSource, you can turn that on and it works just as well, whether your speakers are connected, whether it's a sound bar or some other speakers connected to your display, it works. So great app. Everybody should go check it out. We'll have a link in the show notes to the sponsor post that was on MacStories this week. And I want to thank SoundSource by Rogue Amoeba for sponsoring both the site and the show. Okay, Federico, let's dive into picks. I'm going to let you go first this week.
All right, so I have two picks. The first one is a music album. So I've been really enjoying the new album by All Time Low. All Time Low, they are a punk rock band. They've been around for a while. You may be familiar with their record from 2007. There was the name of the album that album was So Wrong It's Right. There was a song that was very popular. Dear Maria, Count Me In. So you may have come across All Time Low before. The latest album is called Wake Up Sunshine. It came out in early April, so last month, just about a month ago, actually, I think. And it's very good. It's like punk rock maybe doesn't quite define it. It's an alternative rock album with some punk rock influences, I would say. It's very upbeat and energetic and fun, with a lot of catchy songs and some interesting experiments, I think. There's a song, for example, which is called Monsters, that features the rapper Black Bear. And that song has allowed All Time Low to flex their muscles in terms of like the creative approach to the song. It's got an unusual structure, and there's Black Bear in the middle of the song with a couple of dropping a few bars in there. I think it's like the perfect album for right now. Like if if you're bored at home and you want to work out maybe, and you want to listen to something that keeps you going. Like I love listening to this album while I'm doing my like a quick run on my treadmill or my indoor bike. Like this is perfect for that. So if you're into if you like Blink 182, or if you like The Main, right, and all these bands coming from from their punk rock or emo roots, for example, I think you're gonna love this one. So it's fun, it's catchy, it's energetic, it's perfect for this moment. My second pick, oh, and of course you can find the album on Apple Music, you can find the album on Spotify, you can find it whenever. My second pick is a YouTube channel, so this is quite nerdy, but for those listeners out there who, like me, have been playing competitive Pokemon, I just want to give a shout out to Cybertron VGC on YouTube. Cybertron VGC is the name of the channel. The creator's name is Aaron Zhang. Aaron is a previous, I want to say, US national champion of competitive Pokemon back in the day. And is one of the top competitive players globally, and he does really good job at not only explaining the game but also trying different Pokemon, right? Because the competitive Pokemon scene, you will when you play online, you will see the same Pokemon over and over because there are some Pokemon that are better than others. It's just what it is. But I think Aaron does a really good job at trying different teams, trying different strategies, and explaining what he does, and explaining how he won and how he lost. And it's very good, it's very entertaining, and it's very easy to follow. Even if you're new to Pokemon, I promise this will be easy to follow because he does a really good job explaining everything that he does. So, music album and a YouTube channel. I've been binging Cybertron VGC videos lately. All of his videos are like 30, 40 minutes long, so they are perfect to just keep yourself occupied right now.
That sounds like a really good entry point for someone who doesn't really know a lot about competitive Pokemon, because I don't know a lot about it, but I've been kind of following along with what you've been doing, and I've been wondering, where would I want to learn more? That sounds like a good place to start. Okay, Federico, this week I've got a TV show, and it's Home on TV Plus. And this wasn't a show that I really was looking forward to in any kind of way. I'm not the kind of person who really enjoys a lot of home TV shows. I mean, there's usually these shows where you've got someone trying to buy a house, and they look at like the small house in the nice neighborhood and the big house in the not so great neighborhood, and they have to decide what they're going to buy, or maybe they're doing some kind of home renovation. It's really not that at all. This is a show about unusual homes all over the world, and I haven't finished the season yet, but I have watched the first 3 or 4 episodes. And just give you an idea a little bit about what this is all about, the very first episode is about a house in Sweden that's built inside an enormous greenhouse. It's really interesting. I mean, they have all kinds of plants growing in there alongside the house, even in the wintertime. And the family has done that to kind of create a sustainable environment for themselves. And, as kind of out in the woods and natural as that is, the very next episode is set on the south side of Chicago, with an artist who's buying up properties on the south side and renovating them and turning them into spaces for different kinds of artists and performers, and revitalizing a neighborhood that had seen hard times through doing that. So it's an interesting blend of both the information about the structures themselves, but also culture and the people who are behind each of them. So it's more of a storytelling kind of approach to this kind of show. And then the third one that I watched was set in Bali, and it is a house, an enormous, elaborate house that looks a little bit like a tree house that's made entirely out of bamboo. It's really fascinating and interesting. I mean, it explains how over the course of 4 to 5 years, you can grow all the bamboo necessary to create this enormous house. And it's just really an interesting thing to learn about, because I had never considered what that, building a home out of bamboo would be like, nor did I know much about Bali. So I learned a little bit about both, which I enjoyed a lot. It's the kind of show that when I'm not really sure what to watch, I figure I'll just watch one of those. So I'm just kind of slowly working my way through the series. Again, that's on Apple's TV Plus. subscription service, and I'll have a link in the show notes. All right, Federico. Well, that's it for this week of Unwind. Of course, we'll be back next Friday with another episode wrapping up the week. I want to thank again our sponsor. That's SoundSource by Rogue Amoeba. You can find me and Federico over at MacStories and at Club MacStories. Federico is at Viticci on Twitter and Instagram. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees on both. JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.